Rising acidity in the ocean. The world's oceans are in danger from the rising levels of CO2. These rising levels are causing the coral and other creatures under the sea to be in grave danger, and preventing them from properly reproducing and performing their daily function. The CO2 in the ocean comes from burning fossil fuels from cars, factories, and other gas-powered devices. And one of the main vehicles is the boats that are burning fossil fuels directly on top of the ocean. The way the CO2 enters the ocean is through diffusion from the atmosphere. This is not all of the CO2 taken into the ocean, and only about 25 to 30% is truly absorbed into the waters. This is still a problem because the biology and chemical balance or cycle of the oceans is affected. This means the carbon cycle and other cycles cannot be completed properly, and all of the organisms will be put in danger from changing levels. This also is a delicate balance, meaning even slight changes will affect all of the species, even causing certain species to die off. The process has been gradual, but over the past 100 years, one-third of the CO2 in the atmosphere has been taken into the ocean, resulting in the gradual acidification of the ocean. The following video explains the effects on coral.
The impacts of increased carbon dioxide in the water. It's what scientists like Chris Langdon of the University of Miami study.
And it's enough railroad cars stacked end to end to wrap around the Earth 7 times. That's how much carbon's going into the ocean every single year.
All that carbon has caused global sea surface temperatures to rise by about 1.5 degrees Fahrenheit over the last century, according to the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration. Periods of high water temperature cause corals to bleach or expel the colorful algae that live in their tissue, exposing their skeletons. But the CO2 doesn't just warm the ocean, it also changes the ocean's pH levels, which measure the amount of acid in the water and shows they're becoming more acidic.
What's really and completely unique about what's going on right now is the rate of change. And that's what's so difficult for organisms. Things are incredibly adaptable, but the adaptation rate, evolution, takes time.
Acidification acts a lot like osteoporosis does in humans, but in marine animals it makes their shells and skeletons brittle. The more acidic the water, the harder it is for corals to grow their skeletons. That leaves them more susceptible throughout their lives to other stressors like disease. But there's also evidence that it's harder for corals to reproduce when the ocean is more acidic.
So that means if a coral dies, there's less likelihood that a new baby coral is going to be able to replace it in the future.
The main effect of the rising amounts of CO2 in the ocean is the effect on the ocean's pH level, which will affect every organism. With the changing pH, certain organisms would begin to die off, because every organism can only survive in certain pHs. And as the ocean becomes more acidic, the coral becomes bleached, which means the outside of the coral loses its color and the coral begins to die off. This is especially important in the Great Barrier Reef off the coast of Australia, because it's home to several organisms in the Australian Ocean's ecosystem. Also, the Barrier Reef is the food source for these organisms. The effect of the calcifer on the calcifers of the reef is most important because the reproduction process these organisms undergo no longer work. Also, by the year 2050, the entire sea will be undersaturated and lead to organite shells dissolution. Also, the sea urchin will be significantly affected because the fertilization of the rate of this species decreased with rising pressure. This issue can only be fixed the way it started, with the help of the humans. Humans must reduce the amount of CO2 emissions in order to stabilize the acid levels in the ocean, and allow for all the creatures time to adapt and begin to prosper once again. This can be done with alternative energy sources such as solar or wind energy, which lower the global use of CO2. By reducing the total amount of CO2 produced in the oceans would result in a stabilization effect in the ocean and allow for the evolution of the ocean organisms in order to survive. Another method is isolating certain areas of the ocean and controlling the pH level of that part of the ocean. Shellfish farmers are able to do this by isolating the shellfish and purifying the waters until the water is level for the shellfish. This same type of method can be applied to parts of the ocean around the Great Barrier Reef in an effort to save the ecosystem from collapse, and therefore all of the ocean can be saved if the method works successfully.